I told my boyfriend to man up, and he vanished from my life. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife, so I decided to shatter it. I sat there blasting those ridiculous alpha male videos on my phone, laughing, obnoxiously loud. He just stared. I looked him dead in the eye and smirked. Maybe you should take some notes. Okay, look, I know how that sounds. I really do. But you have to understand he pushed me to it. I'm not some monster, I'm just at my wit's end. The thing you have to get about Seth is that 90% of the time, he's the kindest, gentlest person I've ever met. He's the guy who remembers my coffee order, who will listen for an hour about my stupid work drama, who puts a blanket over me when I fall asleep on the couch. That's the man I fell in love with. But that other 10%, that 10% is a black hole of passivity that makes me want to tear my own hair out. This whole thing started over something so stupid, you wouldn't even believe it. We were at a party at our friend's place, right? And this guy, Jason, who's always been kind of a jerk, made this backhanded comment about my career. I work in marketing, and he said something like, "Must be nice to just make memes all day while the rest of us have real jobs." It was condescending, and everyone heard it. The conversation just stopped. And I looked over at Seth, my boyfriend, expecting him to, say something. Not start a fight, God no, but just a simple, "Hey, that's not cool, man," or even a joke to diffuse it. Something to show we were a team. But he didn't. He just did this awkward little laugh. That tight-lipped, please let the ground swallow me whole smile. He just let the insult hang in the air, and the moment passed. I felt my face burn with humiliation. It's like, in that moment, his silence was louder than Jason's insult. It screamed, "I won't defend you. Your feelings aren't worth the discomfort of a minor confrontation." On the car ride home, I tried to bring it up. "That was really uncomfortable back there," I said. Nothing. He just stared out the passenger window, watching the streetlights go by. That's his move. He hates conflict more than anything. So if I bring up something that bothers me, he doesn't get angry. He doesn't yell. He just shuts down. He becomes this passive-aggressive ghost in our apartment. He'll give me one-word answers. He'll suddenly be too tired to talk. He'll get intensely interested in cleaning the grout in the bathroom with a toothbrush. It's his way of punishing me without ever having to say a word, and it drives me absolutely insane. It's a trigger for me, a massive one. My ex was like that, a man so terrified of confrontation he'd let people walk all over him, and me by extension. I swore I would never be with someone like that again. So yeah, when we got home, and he immediately plopped onto the couch and started scrolling through his phone, pretending I wasn't even there, I felt that old rage bubbling up, hot and acidic. It felt like every single time I'd felt unheard. Every time I'd felt like I was fighting for this relationship all by myself, just coalesced into this one giant ball of rage. I couldn't take the silence anymore, so I started playing those stupid videos. I know they're cringe. The ones with some gym bro screaming about being a lion and never apologizing for taking up space. I turned the volume up, right up, until the whole apartment was filled with this toxic, ridiculous advice. I was watching him. I was watching for a flicker, a muscle twitch, anything. But he just sat there, enduring it. And that made me even angrier. It was his silence that made me say it. Honestly, it was. He left me no other choice. So there I was, laughing like a hyena at my phone, and I finally hit pause. The silence rushed back in, heavy and awful, thick with all the things we weren't saying. I looked at him, really looked at him, curled up on the far end of the sofa, trying to make himself as small as possible. And I felt this surge of, I don't know, power. Contempt. It was ugly. I knew it was ugly even as I was feeling it. But in that moment, I felt like I was the one in control, and his silence was the cage I was rattling. I just wanted to crack that calm facade. I wanted to see him break. I told myself that if I could just push hard enough, the real Seth would come out, the one who actually had feelings and opinions he was willing to fight for, the man I needed him to be. "Maybe you should take some notes," I said, my voice dripping with a venom I barely recognized. "Learn how to speak like one of these alpha guys." The words hung there between us. I was braced for the explosion. I was craving it. I wanted him to finally snap, to throw his phone, to stand up and shout, "What is wrong with you, Molly?" Or, "How could you be so cruel?" I had a whole arsenal of responses ready. I was going to tell him how his weakness was suffocating me, how I couldn't respect a man who wouldn't even respect himself enough to stand up for his own girlfriend. I was ready for the fight I felt we needed to have for months. But that's not what happened. He didn't get angry. He didn't even look hurt, not in a way I recognized. He just slowly, very slowly, lifted his head from his phone. His face was completely blank. All the warmth, all the gentle kindness that I knew, it was just gone. It was like a mask had dropped, but underneath wasn't anger, it was just nothing. Emptiness. He looked at me, but it felt like he was looking straight through me, like I was a pane of glass he was about to discard. It was a look of profound, bottomless disappointment. And something else, too. A kind of finality, like a judge's gavel falling. A decision had just clicked into place, and I had been found wanting. He held my gaze for what felt like an eternity. 10 seconds, maybe more. My smirk started to feel frozen on my face. The confidence I'd felt just moments before began to curdle into a cold dread in the pit of my stomach. Then he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Okay," he said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Clear as a bell, no tremor, no anger, just a flat, dead tone. The voice you'd use to confirm a delivery time. "I will." And that was it. He stood up from the couch, no dramatic storming off. He just stood up with a strange, deliberate grace. He walked past me, his shoulder not even brushing mine, and went straight into our bedroom. He closed the door behind him with a soft click, not a slam. The click echoed in the silent apartment. For a second, I just sat there, my heart pounding, the nasty words still tasting like acid on my tongue. A tiny, cold sliver of real fear pierced through my anger, but I pushed it down, hard. He's just being dramatic, I told myself. This is just another one of his passive-aggressive games. He'll be out in an hour to pretend nothing happened. I was so sure I had him all figured out. I was so wrong. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, phone still in my hand, with the faint echo of those idiotic videos in my ears. When I woke up, my neck was stiff and the gray morning light was filtering through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. The apartment was silent, eerily silent. Not the peaceful quiet of an early morning, but a heavy, empty silence that felt wrong. My first thought was, God, he's really going to drag this out. I felt a familiar flash of annoyance, already preparing my lines for the next stage of our Cold War. I got up, stretched, and figured he must have just left for work early to avoid me. Fine, we'd deal with it tonight. I was still operating under the assumption that I was in control of this situation. I walked into the bedroom to get changed, and that's when the cold dread from the night before came rushing back, 10 times stronger. The air in the room felt different, colder. His side of the bed was made. Not just pillows fluffed, but military-grade, perfect corners, like a hotel room that hadn't been slept in. It was unnervingly neat. His phone charger, which was always a tangled mess on his nightstand, was gone. The book he was halfway through reading, its corner folded to mark his page, gone. The worn-out watch he wore every single day, the one I bought him for our first anniversary, gone. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. No, 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 I whispered to myself, my voice sounding strange and small in the quiet room. I stumbled towards the closet and yanked the door open with a rattling screech. It took me a second to process what I was seeing. It wasn't empty. That would have been less weird, less calculated. Instead, it was curated. His favorite leather jacket was gone. His 2 work suits were gone. His running shoes were gone. The toiletries from his side of the bathroom cabinet were gone, except for a half-used bottle of shampoo. But all his old t-shirts, the ones I always told him to throw out, were still there. The ugly Christmas sweater his aunt gave him was still hanging neatly on a hanger. He hadn't just packed in a rage. He had selectively, methodically removed his essential life from our shared space, leaving behind only the ghost of the man I thought I knew. It was precise. It was deliberate. It was terrifying. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I went to his contact, my thumb hovering over the call button. I pressed it. It rang once, then went straight to a generic, robotic voice. "The number you have dialed is not available at this time." My blood ran cold. Not available, not busy, not turned off. Not available. It was a disconnected sound, a final sound. I tried sending a message on WhatsApp. Seth, where are you? This isn't funny, call me. I stared at the screen, my eyes burning, waiting for the 2 blue ticks that meant he'd seen it. Nothing, just one single, lonely gray tick. He hadn't just turned his phone off. He had blocked me. In a full-blown panic, I opened Instagram. I typed his username into the search bar. User not found. My breath hitched in my throat. Facebook, same thing, gone. He hadn't just left, he had erased me. In the space of a few quiet, methodical hours while I slept, he had performed a digital amputation. He had taken every connection we had, every shared photo, every late-night chat, and severed it with surgical precision. He had vanished, and the only thing he left behind was a perfectly made bed and a closet full of things he no longer needed. The silence he'd left wasn't passive anymore. It was active. It was a weapon, and it was screaming at me. The next 48 hours were a blur of pure, uncut panic. I was a mess. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I just paced the apartment, which suddenly felt huge and empty, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline to nowhere. I called him again and again, dozens of times, obsessively, as if the sheer force of my will could break through the digital wall he'd built. Each time, the same robotic voice answered, a cold reminder of my powerlessness. I left rambling, hysterical voicemails on his work phone, starting with anger, then pleading, then just sobbing. I drove to his office building. I actually did that. I sat in the lobby for an hour, feeling like a complete lunatic, until I finally got the courage to go to the front desk. The receptionist, a kind-looking woman with a pitying smile, checked her computer and told me, "Mr. Davies took a personal day today." Her tone was polite, but her eyes said, "You're the crazy ex-girlfriend, aren't you?" I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. He had anticipated this. He had cut off every possible route. Finally, at the absolute end of my rope, I called Jessica, our mutual friend, the one who'd hosted the party. The phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds. When she answered, I just broke. The words came tumbling out of me in a torrent of self-pity and righteous anger. I told her he had just disappeared, ghosted me like some coward after a minor disagreement. I framed it as him overreacting, being childish. I'm ashamed to admit, I completely downplayed what I'd said. I think I muttered something about making a stupid joke that he took the wrong way. I was painting myself as the victim, and I was desperate for her to validate that. But she didn't. There was just this long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. It was so quiet I thought the call had dropped. "Jess, are you there?" "I'm here," she finally said, and her voice was tired. So tired. "Molly, what exactly did you say to him?" The way she asked, it wasn't curious. It was like she already knew and was just dreading the confirmation. My stomach twisted. I told her. I repeated the words, and hearing them out loud, saying them to another person, they sounded 1,000 times uglier. I told him maybe he should learn how to talk from those alpha male guys. Another silence, then a deep, weary sigh. "Oh, Molly," she said, and there was no judgment in her voice, just a profound sadness that was somehow worse. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "His dad," she said softly. "His father is a very gentle man, a pushover, honestly. And Seth's mom resented him for it, her whole life. She belittled him constantly, in private and in front of the kids. Called him weak, called him spineless, told him he wasn't a real man. It was his entire childhood, Molly. Watching the woman he loved slowly crush the man he looked up to with words. He swore to himself he would never, ever be in a relationship like that. He told me once that the single greatest fear he has in this world is becoming his father." The phone felt slick in my hand. The room started to spin. "That wasn't just a stupid joke," Jessica continued, her voice gaining a sharp edge of clarity. "You didn't just push a button. You took his deepest, most defining trauma, the very thing he built his entire identity around avoiding, and you weaponized it. You became his mother. In that one sentence, you confirmed his absolute worst fear. It's been a few weeks now. On the outside, I'm putting on a masterclass in being fine. I've been going out with friends, laughing a little too loudly, drinking a little too much. Last night, I was at a bar with Jessica and a few other girls, and I launched into this big, bold monologue about how much better off I am. Honestly, it's a relief, I said, swirling the ice in my gin and tonic. I mean, who has the energy to date a man-child you have to constantly prop up? Good riddance. The next guy I date is going to have a backbone, you know? Someone who isn't afraid of his own shadow. I even managed a convincing eye roll. So yeah, the next one will be better behaved. Another round. My friends exchanged those quick, awkward glances that people use when they don't know what to say. They smiled weakly and nodded, trying to be supportive, but I could see the pity in their eyes. They knew I was full of it. I knew I was full of it. The whole performance felt hollow, like I was an actress in a really bad play about a strong, independent woman. The party ended, and I came home alone. The apartment doesn't feel like a home anymore. It just feels like a space filled with the ghosts of our laughter and arguments. It's too big for one person. Too quiet. His stupid, ugly Christmas sweater is still hanging in the closet, and I can't bring myself to throw it away. Tonight, I saw it lying on the chair where I'd tossed it after a failed attempt at cleaning out his things. It was just a lump of cheap wool, but it felt like the only real thing in the room. I walked over to it, my bravado from the bar completely gone, replaced by that familiar, crushing weight in my chest. I don't know why I did it. I just picked it up. It was soft. I lifted it to my face and buried my nose in the collar. And just for a second, I could smell him. Not his cologne, but just him. That faint, clean scent of his laundry detergent mixed with something that was uniquely Seth. It was the smell of 1,000 lazy Sunday mornings and 1,000 quiet nights on the couch. And that's what finally broke me. Not the silence, not the blocked numbers, but the ghost of a scent on an old sweater. All the tough talk, all the pretending, it just dissolved into nothing. I slid down to the floor, clutching that stupid sweater like a drowning person clings to a piece of driftwood, and I finally let myself cry. Not loud, angry sobs, but the silent, hopeless, ugly kind of crying that comes from knowing you didn't just lose something. You destroyed it, willfully, and there's absolutely no one to blame but yourself.